we began a series last week called The Fruits of the Spirit. And my husband did an introduction to the series. And we are teaching kind of every other week, him and I. And so it's my turn, and we get to talk about love because love is the first one on the list. And we're just going to be, regular. We're just going to go in order. So we're going to talk about love tonight. And it's called The Test of Real Love. So we're going to start with our fruits of the Spirit verse, just to kind of recap. Galatians 5:22 said, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering or patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law." And what I want to point out is something he said last week, which was that this isn't our fruit that we in our natural human fallen states have. This is the fruit of the Spirit that when we are filled with the Spirit, it becomes ours. And then we release it and we demonstrate this fruit to the world. So let's talk about the fruit of love. Well, I'm not a big country music fan. There are some songs that I personally have liked. God Bless the USA, that's a pretty cool one, okay? There are some songs that I personally enjoy that are country, but I'm not overall like a big country music person. Maybe I spent too much time in the city. I don't know. But, the other night, they were having a country music night at Red's Pizza, and my husband asked me if I wanted to go. And I said, can we go and order a pizza when we're there and get some ice cream? I happen to really like her pizza. Her pizza's the best. And he's like, sure. And then I started thinking about it, and that would also mean I don't have to cook. Oh, I really do like country music after all. So I'm sitting there listening to this guy who's singing. They were really great, actually. This whole band was pretty good. And, they're just singing all pretty appropriate, just good songs, nothing bad about them. But anyways, all of a sudden this song comes on that I had heard before, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places. Now, I've heard this song before, but I never really listened to the whole thing. And because, our pizza was gone, and I was like, I'm just going to sit and listen to it and see what it's really all about. And the more I listened, I was like, this song has a happy ending. I didn't even realize that. Like, this guy is talking about the love he had found a while ago and what he was doing before he found that love. But it reminded me that in one way or another, in one form or another, we all are looking for love. Real love, authentic love that comes from the heart. Some of us are married, and so we found, I think pretty much all of us have been married, but we found that love in marriage, but we also, some of us have had kids, and it's a different kind of love, and we've experienced that as well. Some of us are aunties and uncles, and we experience love from our nieces and nephews, and there's different kinds of love, but I think we all at some point in time look for some kind of real authentic love. And so if we're looking for it at some point in time in our lives, then I think it's safe to say that there's a world out there that is looking for real love. Now, believe it or not, there is a counterfeit to real love. Okay? I'm sure everybody, you think about loving someone to get something back in return. That's counterfeit love. In a way, if you think about it, loving to earn power, prestige, or to try to get PR for your company, that's counterfeit, okay? And loving in order to manipulate, counterfeit, right? Obvious examples of counterfeit love would be a gang that tries to recruit a young, vulnerable teenage boy by saying, look, we're family, because that's what they do. They pose as family. That's what... Another thing is, and since we're all adults, I think I can say this, but a sexual predator grooms his or her prey by offering extravagant gifts. And that's what, if you're trying to love to get something like that in return, and then eventually demands payment, by the way, that's counterfeit, though. And there's a world of people out there who've experienced the counterfeit and are looking for the real. And the only way we find that is in Jesus. And I think we can all agree to that. So Romans 12, 9 through 11 says, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. So love must be from the heart. When we love someone, we love from the heart. Instead of using flattery, for example, this might be a very subtle example, and this is something I think I'm guilty of at times. Instead of flattering, show real appreciation. That's love from the heart. Okay? So love must be sincere. Now, so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to give a test of real love. And I'm going to give 5 things that the Bible says about real love. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are just some things that kind of came to my mind and that I think are important to address. And so there's 5 things that determine, in my opinion, 5 of many, but 5 things that can determine if a love is real. First, real love puts people at utmost importance. 1 John 2:15 through 17 says, do not love the world or the things in this world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever. And this verse that I really believe in one way or another states that the love of God and the love of the world do not coexist in a human heart. Okay? Now, when there's an issue with family or there's an issue with friends, do we think about the people before maybe something that we worked hard to get? Well, I'm going to tell you a story about somebody who did. I was the maid of honor in my best friend's wedding, and it was one of the best days of my life. But the day beforehand, we were staying at her mother's house, by the way, and her mother and father were the sweetest people. And the day beforehand, we were doing our nails. And we had these napkins and things like that. Now, she told us before we got started that she was very excited about her new dining room table. And I think she'd gotten it for somewhere around $600, and she'd gotten this new dining room table and chairs. And she got a good deal on it, and she was so excited about it. And just in time for the wedding, right? And so we're sitting there doing our nails, and she comes around with towels, and she's like, I want you to use this towel instead. Or I don't know how she said it, but she said, hey, you can use this if you'd like. And my napkins seemed to be just working just fine. And okay, you can ask my husband later, but I haven't always been the most careful person and exercise the most highest degree of caution. I could still grow in that area. He could probably tell you. So I was thinking this napkin is doing just fine, and all of a sudden I took the napkin off the table, and the table had literally soaked in nail polish remover from it, and I was mortified. I didn't know if she was going to ask me to pay for that table or not. And all of a sudden she takes a deep breath and she goes, it's okay, we'll get it fixed. People are more important than things. And I was like, wow. Well, a few years later, after their marriage and their wedding got started, I came back there to spend the night with my friend. And I was eating dinner with them. She had made this delicious casserole, and all of a sudden I looked down at the table, and sure enough, they had gotten it fixed except for this much. And I felt bad, and I still have a scar when I think about it. But if you think about it, that shows an example about somebody who was more concerned about not humiliating me, which she could have done, or not making me pay for it or anything like that, but more concerned about people. And that's how we have to be. So, question, do we care more about people than we do about things? That's the first question. So, number 1, real love puts people first. Because those are the only ones we can take to heaven anyways, right? So that's what matters. Number 2, real love is always accompanied by truth. I know Ben used this in his message on Sunday, because I did his PowerPoint, but I don't exactly know what he did with it, so I'm gonna share two verses of his passage. In Ephesians 4:14-15 says that we should no longer be children tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the trickery of men in the cunning craftiness and deceitful plotting, but speaking the truth in love may grow up in all things into him who is the head, Christ. Another verse, 1 Peter 1:22 says, since you have purified your souls in obeying the truth through the Spirit in sincere love of the brethren, love one another fervently with a pure heart. Telling the truth without love is not difficult. For some people, I don't know. Some of us is not difficult. I told you so. The truth hurts. Or, I hope you learned your lesson. Now, just depending on how you say some of these things, it may be with or without love, but the truth is speaking the truth and not having a heart of love is not as hard. But speaking the truth in love is a little more challenging. There are times where it's easier to ignore the truth, right? Or times where if you tell the truth, somebody might think you're being unloving when you actually were. There's times where telling the truth can lead to rejection, like if you share the gospel with someone and they say, quit slamming your religion down my throat, right? But telling the truth is something we have to do in love. So, let's see here. If we really love people, we will tell them the truth no matter how much it hurts us to tell them. So, however, one thing I try to remember, and I'm not, perfect at this, but if I need to tell somebody something difficult, I need to first ask myself, am I doing this out of a heart of love? And if I'm not, but I still have to say it, maybe I just need to wait just a little bit longer until I know I'm right. My heart is right and I'm ready to do it. So, but sometimes we have to tell people the truth in love. But if we say it out of a heart of love, it won't come off so hard, and they're probably a lot more likely to receive it. So, question, do I speak the truth out of a heart of love? So first, real love puts people first, and second, real love speaks the truth. Third, real love always brings out the best in people. Well, first, to bring out the best in people, you have to believe the best about them. Let's say somebody does something questionable. Do you always assume that they meant harm towards you, or do you assume they meant well? Maybe you don't know, right? We don't know the thoughts and intentions of people's hearts. So what do we assume? What's our first reaction? Now, me and Ben were in we were in premarital counseling, and we went through a video series from the authors of the books called Love and Respect. And it was very beneficial. I mean, it was very helpful. And one thing that he said, I think his name is Emerson Eggerichs. I think that's how do you pronounce it. But he said you always believe the best of your spouse. So they do something and you're not really sure. Always think that they actually meant well. And here's the situation that we had last week. My husband took 2 of our warmers from church and brought them to an event at Light Path because they needed them to use for a ministry. Then they used them, he brought it back home, he washed them, and he left them on the table for, 4 days or so. And I started thinking, was he just assuming that I was going to bring them back? Or was he going to ask me, or was he going to bring them back? And so we started this conversation, and at first it didn't go in the right direction. You know what I'm talking about? Y'all have been married, okay, so y'all know. And at some point I was like, you know what? I am not doing this right. I'm not believing the best. And all of a sudden I turned to him and I said, Ben, I'm sorry that just because you left something out doesn't mean that you assumed I was going to take care of it. And he's like, yeah, that's kind of right. Actually, last few times I've gone to the church, my hands were full and I wasn't able to. So I'd rather believe the best and be wrong, but I'd be a lot happier. I'm usually a lot happier if I believe the best in people, even if I'm wrong, than to believe the worst and be wrong. Okay, so I'm just happier when I believe that people have good intentions toward me. I'm just happier. My life is better. I have more peace. And so it's important that we believe the best in people. Well, another reason why is because what we believe in here is going to come out here. Usually, okay? Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And I'm going to read this verse in 3 different versions. 1 Corinthians 13:7. And we're going to start with the NKJV, and I'm just going to read 2 now and 1 later. But it says, it's talking about love. It says, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. But if you read it in the Amplified Classic, I kind of like the way they took the believes all things part. And they said this, love bears up under anything and everything that comes, is ever ready to believe the best of every person. Its hopes are fadeless under all circumstances, and it endures everything without weakening. So love believes the best of people. Now, let's see here. If we believe the best of them, we'll speak well of them. And not only that, but we'll look for things that they are good at. Good qualities that they have, things that they bring to the table. We'll notice those good things instead of just dwelling on their bad qualities. Everybody's got flaws, we all do, right? But you can either constantly dwell on somebody's good qualities or you can constantly dwell on their bad ones. And love is going to bring out those good qualities. And I got a good news for you about that. When we dwell on somebody else's good qualities, we're most likely to see more of them come out and less of their bad qualities. But if all we do is dwell on their bad quality, well, get ready because you're probably going to see more of it. So think about there's beauty in every single person. And every single person has something to contribute or something to bring to the table. Even if that means they're greeting people or making someone feel welcome, they don't have to do something. They don't have to preach or teach or play piano or sing. There's so much, everybody has something to come to the table. And so it's important that we focus on what people do bring and not some of the things that may be difficult about them. So Romans 12:14 says, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. So even those who persecute us, like the Romans did, and they put us in jail, and we're supposed to speak well of them. Well, if we have to speak well of them, how about just somebody else that we know that maybe just rubs us the wrong way once in a while? Everybody. That verse pretty much does it all. We need to bless and speak well of people. And that word bless means to praise them. It means to say good things about them. There will always be people that we disagree with, and some may even speak bad about us. But how can we bless those who are not easy to bless? First of all, we just choose not to speak any evil about them, right? If you can't say something nice, don't say anything. But we can go beyond that, right? Ask God to show us the good in them. God, I know that this person just drives me crazy, but Lord, I know that, I would like you to show me what you see in them. Because sometimes our perception is not always perfect, okay? Also, ask God to give us the love for them. Now, I want to show an illustration. Believe it or not, this actually does work. It really does work. And I'm going to share you back when I was in college. Now, I was in college, and I started taking part of a church plant in St. Paul, Minnesota. And a couple years later, I've been part of this church plant for a couple of years, and a new girl comes along, and eventually, we could see that she had a lot of talent, and she was all right, but there was something about her. They kind of gave her a title at the church, and I kind of maybe thought that she sort of liked her title a little bit too much. Maybe it got to her head, and I didn't have a title because, well, my gifts and abilities weren't always noticed. Honestly, that's probably what I thought, but honestly, they weren't really developed. And some of them weren't developed, but some of it was just me getting in my own head, okay, thinking that nobody appreciates what I bring to the table. And I got to the point where, and I don't really know what brought it about, but all of a sudden I realized that I was in the wrong. And I prayed and I asked God, just give me a love for her. And he did. And I'm telling you, I felt differently after that. And her and I had a good relationship until she left, like maybe a year later. But we parted well. But you know, God can change our hearts toward people. There's a time I was working and God showed me that I was too critical towards a colleague. And you know, God can change how we feel towards other people. God can help us to see the beauty that's in them that we never saw if we just ask. So, real love puts people first. Real love speaks the truth. And real love brings out the best in people. And we can do that. Because we have Jesus and he's the source of it. Fourth, real love leaves no one out. And there's a little bit longer passage. Luke 10:25 through 37. One day, an expert of religious law stood up to test Jesus, asking him this question. Teacher, what should I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus replied, what does the law of Moses say? How do you read it? The man answered, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Right, Jesus told him. Well, good job. You answered the question right. Do this and you will live. The man wanted to justify his actions. So he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? Like, who do I gotta love? I know I gotta love my mom, my dad, but do I have to love, those people over there? And Jesus, being the expert teacher that he was, told this story. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him up, and left him half dead beside the road. By chance, a priest came along, but when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. A temple assistant walked over and looked at him lying there, but he also passed by on the other side. Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged him. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn where he took care of him. The next day he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, take care of this man. If the bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here. Now, which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits? Jesus asked. The man replied, the one who showed him mercy. Then Jesus said, yes, now go and do the same. There are many people in my life who have done this kind of sort of thing to me. In fact, when I was in high school, God called me to go to North Central University, which is a Bible college similar to Evangel, same denomination and everything, but it's in Minnesota. It's like the college that's up in the North Central region of the United States for the Assemblies of God. And it's kind of a liberal arts college. I went to get my teaching degree. But when I got there, well, I was a bit of a mess. I had very low self-esteem. My roommates had to pray for me. But there were many people who loved me. People who were respectable. People who everyone else liked. And when they loved me and they included me or they sent me a little Valentine or whatever, they did so many little acts of kindness toward me that communicated to me that I was valuable. But one of them in particular was my freshman year RA. And an RA is a resident advisor. It's somebody who's in charge of a group of women who live on a certain floor, okay? And so I got there as a freshman, completely, brand new. And everyone on that floor loved me and showed me kindness. And I think it was a lot in part due to her. But I'm going to say one story. Now, you guys, I make fun of my art skills now, but back then I didn't even know I was bad at art, okay? My art teacher would just say, be encouraged, be encouraged. I didn't know that art really just wasn't my thing, and I wasn't very confident. Okay, now I'm like, I know I have other qualities. It's okay. I can make fun of myself. But back then, art, it was, I didn't know. So now we were decorating for Christmas, and the floor that did the best would get a prize, and it was a big deal. Like, we wanted this floor to be decked out and look beautiful. And so I offered to cut out a Christmas tree for our fireplace scene. And when I did, it was completely crooked. And I don't know if that was just the only paper we had or what, but I put it up there and I felt terrible. I was like, we might lose on account of me. These ladies probably think I'm nuts. My art skills stink. And I felt very vulnerable in that moment. And my freshman RA comes up and wraps her arms around me and says, I love you, Brenda. And I was speechless. All I could say was thank you. And it was because of people like her that I went into college broken and I came out whole. Who in your life respects you and thinks highly of you, that you could just give them a little bit more time and a little bit more love? Because I guarantee you, you never know what kind of impact you're going to make in their life. You never know. Now, I told her in a text on Facebook, it was a private message, that she made a big impact in my life. But I don't know if she ever realized how much. Who can we be a good neighbor to? Who is it somebody that we just need to give them a little bit more of our attention? So that's number 4. Number 5, real love never gives up. Now I'm going to read this verse again in the New Living Translation, 1 Corinthians 13:7. Love never gives up. Love never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. A couple weeks ago, we went to see a movie called Sound of Hope, the story of Possum Trot. It's a true story about a black community in East Texas, and 22 of the families adopted 77 children out of the foster care, and gave them a loving community where they could grow up and live the rest of their childhood years. Now, there was a story in this movie that this was basically the center of the movie, is about a girl named Terry, and she wasn't brought into the pastor and his wife's home until she was about 10. And by then she had experienced so much trauma, so much that her coping mechanism was to pretend to be a cat. She went through so much struggle. And, either she was running away or she would hide a knife in her room, or there were so many things that she did, and those parents could have easily said, I guess it's just not a good fit. But one thing the pastor's wife in the movie said is love never gives up. And eventually, she came to a breaking point where she learned to trust them, and she broke down in tears and cried, and I cried watching it. But one thing, when I see movies like this, I gotta learn the backstory. I go on YouTube and I wonder how close this is to the real story. And it's very close. Not perfectly, but it's very close. And one thing I learned by watching videos of the real, their names are W.C. and Donna Martin. And by watching videos of them, I learned that she actually didn't want to be adopted until this movie came out 20 years later, because this happened back in the 90s, by the way. This movie comes out 20 years later, and she sees a movie about her life and finally asks them to adopt her. Love never gives up. Who is in a battle? Who in your life is fighting a battle of some kind and just needs you to stay in the fight with them? Maybe they're fighting a battle for healing. Maybe they're fighting a battle of addiction. Or maybe they're fighting a battle of praying for their kids to come back to the Lord. Maybe they're praying for one of God's promises to come true in their life. If you know of somebody who needs that, I encourage you just to stay in the fight with them. Don't give up. So in summary, love puts people first. Love speaks the truth. Love brings out the best in people. Love leaves no one out, and love never gives up. Let's just bow our heads, and I just want to